Today's guest conversation is with the newly hired Coach Chris Morris of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Coach Morris, welcome to the Baseball Forward podcast, my friend. How are you this morning?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. I'll tell you what. I'm excited to talk to you this morning. We took a couple of weeks off with the Baseball Forward podcast because I know, hey, you baseball coaches this time of year, it's crazy. You're starting to settle in at the end of the year. We wound down a few weeks ago. Man, you just got hired as the head baseball coach at MIT. How does that feel?
It still probably hasn't hit me yet. I mean, just being around campus a little bit here, certainly the past couple of weeks has been pretty exciting. Just the buzz around the city and having some background there. Being an assistant was certainly pretty special. My time there, looking back at it, and certainly just really excited to get back to work there and be at one of the best universities in the world is really, really exciting for me.
What's a lot of fun is I love getting to just the names of some of the schools. Okay, that when doing this podcast and talking with some of the coaches and the names of some of the schools, and I had one of my sons. They said, "Who are you talking to today?" And I said, "The MIT's head coach." He's like, "What's MIT?" I said, "Listen, MIT. Remember, because he's only 10." I said, "It is what you just said." I go, "It is one of the most prestigious institutions, not just in this country, in the world." So I almost kind of feel like, whoa, man, I need to make sure that I'm speaking properly. I've got my grammar in check. Don't ask me any math questions or anything like that. So when as the coach at MIT, and I know you're fresh off it, but you're coming off of an excellent run at Husson.
Yep.
Your alma mater. You're a Division III guy. Former. Hey, you lettered in football as well. So this is a dual sport athlete. Coach Morris, this is a guy that has done this at this level. He knows this level intimately. As you start your tenure at MIT, what's kind of what are you focused on the most going into year one?
I think year one, I mean, I guess kind of different phases. I mean, certainly right now it's, getting to know our current roster too. And, obviously with a coaching change, there's a lot of stuff that takes place and a lot of uncertainty and those types of things. So it's spent a decent amount of time just trying to get to know our guys, that are coming back and, certainly have some familiarity with them, by following the program over the past few years and that, but at the same time and getting to know them and jumping on the ground, running, recruiting. I think recruiting is always going to be your pipeline, specifically at the Division III level. So, making sure that, we're at the places that we need to be at, we're seeing the recruits that we need to see and, checking transcripts and test scores and making sure we're finding qualified athletes that, meet the high standard of MIT. So I think that's really where we're at right now. And then making sure that, we're kind of starting to get organized as a coaching staff, making sure that our coaching staff's hired and we know what our roles are going to be and where we're going to be. And, just excited to get back down there. To be honest, fall ball can't come soon enough. I think being able to get with the guys and start building those relationships. And, that's kind of what I'm focused on right now. I don't try to look too far into the future, to be honest. I think I'm a big be where your feet are guy.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm trying to do right now is just kind of take it one day at a time. And, but that's really kind of what most I'm looking forward to right now.
Man, that's awesome. Talking with Coach Chris Morris of MIT. Man, the challenges, I can't imagine it. I don't want to say the schools that I attended weren't, they were good schools. Okay. But boy, the challenges of MIT, I think of like this filter to get into college baseball. There's this filter, man. And it not many get through it, but then to get into, to play college baseball and then filter your way in the limited access to the limited number of players that you have access to because of the standards that come with MIT. What do you see as, that's got to be a challenge? I mean, from my perspective, I'm like, dang, that limits the pool quite a bit. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if I view it as a challenge. I think I view it as a blessing in a lot of ways, right? I mean, you're going to start recruiting some of the brightest minds in the world that are going to change the world. So I think that's an exciting way to look at it, from my perspective and, being able to find them like, yes, is it a little more challenging to find them. Yes, like that's obviously the challenge, but I think it's also the reward, being here at a school like this. And so that's kind of how I view that aspect of it. And yeah, you got to travel the country to find these prospective student athletes, to give us a chance to find the right fit for us from an admission standpoint, from a baseball standpoint. I think we're in one of the best baseball conferences in the country within the NUMAC, so I mean, there's a high standard there as well. So I think there's a lot of different factors that go into it, but it's exciting. I think at the same time, you get to meet new people. Recruiting's fun to me. Meeting new families, seeing different parts of the country, and student athletes with different backgrounds, different interests, all those types of things, and how as a coach you can bring them all together to go after one common goal and win a championship is really fun.
Heck yeah. Talking with Coach Chris Morse, MIT, on the Baseball Forward podcast today. Boy, in the world that we live in, it's refreshing to me to think about what your culture probably looks like, because in the world that we live in today, the hot buttons, transfer portal, NIL, I got to be honest, baseball, college baseball, man, I love it. I love baseball in general, but it's becoming a business, and it's so transactional as opposed to relational. I feel like when I played, maybe when you played, it was definitely more relational. So I can't imagine the transfer portal affects MIT all that much. I imagine the guys that you're going to get are the guys that are going to be there for the duration. Am I fair in my assessment of the type of situation you have going on at MIT?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certain those aspects. I mean, I think as and just touched on, I mean, the landscape of college athletics is changing daily, right? I think you have to be able to really be able to harp on what's going to work for you and what's going to work. Does our academic piece certainly, I think, keep a lot of kids here? Absolutely. But we, a young man who, is a, Mason Estrada right now, who, is committed to going to Tennessee,
Wow.
So, I mean, that's, those are things where I think it's going to happen anywhere, in that world. But I think at the same time, yes, I mean, our degree programs are so special. They're so driven. They're so exclusive. And, the things that you can do with an MIT degree when you graduate are just so special, and there's a lot of schools that have that same balance, but I think that's where we kind of separate ourselves in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing, because to me, I want to believe that, I have two boys, 10 and 11, and I want them, I get it. Things change. I understand that, but I want them to experience baseball like not in this showcase mentality of what can the team do for me? What can I do for the team? Like, I feel those are the pieces of college baseball that when I look back and reflect on kind of my career, my life as a baseball guy, it was about the teammates. It was about the characteristic building. It was about, learning who you are. And I feel like we're losing that to a certain degree with where we're at. How important is culture to you, and making it about the human interactions with the players that you have?
Yeah, I think your culture to me is everything in a way. I think it starts as a coaching staff. The coaching staff has to have a great culture. They have to be unique. They have to be bonded. They have to be on the same front. I think when you start that within your coaching staff, I always just personally feel that it trickles into your program. And so that's kind of our goal here at MIT with Coach Carroll, Coach Hawk, and being able to, I think, develop that culture, which has always been here. When I was an assistant here with Coach Barlow, it was, we had a tremendous staff, and there was a very, common bond there. So I think that's important. But then I think your team culture, a lot of times, sometimes you might have to dictate that year by year. I think within programs, you have different leaders, you have different skill steps within your leaders. But, we focus on just working hard, having fun playing baseball, and enjoying being around the game. I think when you focus on three simple things, and it allows you to coach them hard, it allows you to have some fun with them on both ends. And I think those things are just really important to me from a team culture aspect. But I think you haven't heard a lot of teams that, watching the College World Series right now, it seems like a lot of people have great culture. You don't win at a high level without having great culture. You have great leaders, great kids in your program. I think those are all really special things. And I have two little boys and a daughter, so I kind of use this as a really, I think it was early on in my career here at Husson, but, we want to recruit people that, I want my kids to be around all day.
Wow.
I want them to emulate, and, look up to,
Wow.
and I think that to me made it really simple. And from a recruiting standpoint and a culture standpoint, if you want your kids to be around, your own children to be around all your players, that makes it really easy in my eyes.
Boy, that's maybe in all the episodes I've done with of this show, that's maybe the best way I've heard it put. Because, dude, the reality of it is you're a dad. You're a dad, and what an easy way. I mean, once you said that, I'm thinking, yeah, that's what I would want for my kids. I would want them to be able to kind of look up and have these idols. 5 years from now, when you look back at where your time at MIT, what do you want MIT baseball? What do you want to be the hallmarks, the identity of MIT baseball? What does that look like? Are you guys running bases well? Are you dirt bags? Like, what does that look like for you?
I think for us, it's just simple. It's tough, competitive, and just smart baseball players. I think I like to use. I know, at a school like MIT, you use smart. It's obviously a really thing there. But I think when you talk about smart, it goes back to playing the game the right way and knowing what we want to do situationally. There's so many different things that happen in a baseball game where if you can take advantage of certain things, it changes the complex of the game. So tough, competitive, smart baseball players. And I think when you do that, you're going to give yourself a chance to win a lot of baseball games. That's for sure.
That's right. That's right. When I say pitching and defense wins championships, I'm hearing that a lot. You talk about the College World Series being on right now, and I'm hearing Berkey and Kyle Peterson saying pitching and defense, timely hitting. So when I say pitching and defense to you, Coach Morris at MIT, like, what does that mean? Good pitching and good defense. What does that look like to you?
I think for us here at MIT, I think pitching's so tough in general now. There's just a lot of things there. I think I was at a game, 2 days ago, and it's you hear everybody being like, just throw strikes. And, okay, what do you think I'm trying to do here? That's the first. I was a pitcher too, so it's like, oh my goodness, here we go. But I think just giving pitchers a chance to just compete and attack. That's the word that we like to use here at MIT. And, Coach Carroll, who will run our pitching staff, was with the Mariners for the past couple of years and was long tenured at MIT. But being able to just attack, and using that word versus putting pressure on other people. It's just go right at them. Have confidence in your stuff. To me, it's the scariest attribute in sports. I think we can sit here and talk about everything. It goes to confidence for me. It's, we want confident players. Guys who believe in their stuff, and believe what we're going to do. I think having that word attack there. And then I think defense is just repetition, knowing what you're going to do, how you're going to play the game.
Wow.
The more repetition that you use, the more confidence you build, so we build that through practice, and it's just reps. I think when you put all that kind of stuff together, it puts you in the right position to go win a lot of games, which is certainly our end result.
Boy, I really like hearing the repetition piece of it. Because, okay, again, I'll go back to like the younger ages and for the Baseball Forward podcast. I mean, what I see as a dad when I go watch baseball is the and it's not their fault, but it's the lack of IQ or the lack of it's what do they say? Baseball is trial and error, and there haven't been enough trials yet. So repetition. When you say repetition, is it when you guys are working on your stuff? Is it the understanding situation to situation, understanding where they need to be? Is it the physical repetitions? Talk to me a little bit more about what repetition means to you.
I think it's both in my eyes. I think you have to have repetition where it is slow and you organize yourself a little bit to know what your body's doing.
Sure.
Then I think it's also utilizing that as a coach to put them in repetitions where they're playing in game speed, where they're playing in repetitions that, matter to them, where they have to think and move and be fast and play fast. Because all skills are great, right? I mean, hitting, BP, everything's great. But if you can't put all these skills together in a game, what are we doing them for? So finding a way to create an atmosphere where you can do all of those things. You can put everything together. You can go from, BP, cage to putting it together in a game situation, and being able to teach them how to think under those lines, I think are really, really important to me. And, I think it's just a really big piece of the game in my mind. Certain people have different views of it, which is certainly okay, but I just do. I think the more reps you do, and we've done a lot of that here at Huston the last 5 years, and I think kids you get so many reps, it becomes second nature to you, and you get a lot more confidence in your abilities and confidence in what you're doing to do. And through that confidence, I think it builds into a better game.
I love hearing that. Talking with Coach Chris Morris on the Baseball Forward podcast, episode 60.
Here we go.
Yeah, man, 60. It's just a special number, like a spring training number for you.
That's right.
So confidence, because I think you and I both know that when you have confidence as a baseball player, boy, you might have everything. So how do you build confidence to the younger guys listening out there, to the guys maybe that are struggling right now? Confidence seems to be the component that, man, when I'm playing with it, I am my best version of myself. So Coach Howard, or Coach Morris, how do you build confidence in your players?
I think it's communication. One, I think that's think of a pipeline for me, I guess you could say, is you got to be in constant communication, with your players. And I think that's, specifically at a school like MIT, knowing how their day is, is school really tough. There's certain days where it's
probably
might just not look like himself, even here, at Huston, there's days it's, what's going on, you just don't let, I think so. That communication piece, I think, comes into a lot of factors, and just having, how's your day, you're in stretch and, what's going on. I think that happens. But I think building confidence goes back into your routine, what works for each player. I'm a big proponent. I got kids here, and, my 7-year-old learns different than my 4-year-old. My 7-year-old is super visual, likes to see, if I take a video of him hitting, he can do it the next time. My 4-year-old's like, get that camera out of my face, and that's just how he operates. He's like, nope, let me take 80 hacks and we'll figure it out.
Let's go.
So understanding how you build on those two things, and going to each, athlete and figuring out what works best for them, and how can I teach them? I taught phys ed for a decent amount of years before I got into the full-time coaching stuff. And, that was a factor in every class. You can't teach them all the same. You got to be able to find a way to connect every player, find a way to connect every student. And I think once you do that, then all of a sudden that confidence factor comes into play. And then it's, teaching them, what does my swing feel like when I do this? What's my swing feel like when I roll over, and being able to communicate that. Cause again, you're not standing right beside them in a game. You're in the dugout or you're in the third base box. So you got to be able to think between your two ears and be able to communicate that self to yourself of what you have to do. And I think as a coach, once you teach them that, more confidence comes from that.
Let's go, man. Okay. Going into that, because I feel like being coachable as a kid, boy, I think the majority of coaches get into coaching because they want to help. I believe that. And if I'm a student athlete, if I'm a player, I got to believe that the coach has my best interest at hand. So when I say being coachable, and let's relate it to the recruiting process for you, like what attracts you to certain players. Does being coachable, is that an attractive quality of players that you're looking for at MIT?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's something that has become a bit of a, I don't know if it's a lost art. I guess might not be the right word there. I think is asking questions, right? I think a lot of people have, in my personal opinion, sometimes, and like I probably was guilty of this younger in my coaching career, was like people asking questions is like questioning you, like in your coaching of them.
Yeah. Wow.
But I think it really goes back to them trying to figure out how they can be good, right? If they don't understand what you're saying, they're not going to be confident in that. I go back to, you ask a question in a classroom, right? And you got a really big question about it. You're probably going to remember that on the test.
Yeah.
Because you asked that question, right? Because you gained confidence from asking that question. So I think a lot of that communication to me is, guys, ask questions. How I word it to you, you might be like, what is this guy talking about? Like, I got no idea what he's saying. And even with both of my boys right now, it's, buddy, what are you not what are you not feeling? What are you not, is this not working? Oh, I feel that, and it's creating them to ask more questions, and I think I've seen them become more confident in their skills, in all their sports. But I really push a lot of kids to ask questions, and it goes into the recruiting process. Ask more questions to coaches. I know a lot of people have, the list of, what questions they want to ask every coach, which I think is a great idea, but get your questions answered. It makes you more confident in your decision. It makes you more comfortable in your decision. I think all of those things come into being coachable, and I think that's an open communication, right? I got to be able to ask you questions. Hey, what are you feeling here? Why'd you swing at that 2-0 fastball? Did we cut the plate in half? Are we looking for this pitch? Stuff like that. Why'd we, flip it here? I think those things all come into play within that coachable piece. But I really try to push kids in that direction. I think sometimes questions have become a lost art in a lot of ways. It's just been, I can either flip open my phone, or I can grab an iPad, or I'm just a yes, yes, coach, yes, coach, yes, coach, which at times I think we have to be. But at times I think there's time to learn and time to grow, and questions are a good way to do that.
Man, that's good stuff, because coaches are they're in the fire. They're on the journey with you as a player. When you realize that they are your ally, I feel like that can be a powerful situation. Talking with Coach Chris Morris, MIT. I want to know what does fall look like for this coming fall? Like, how does that work for the fall in MIT? The guys get on campus. Is it a right away thing? Do you let them kind of get their feet wet? What is the fall going to look like for you guys?
Well, this fall we are actually probably gonna be in the process of building a new field. So
Nice.
a new turf. So like that, this fall could be a little bit different than what normal falls I think will look for us. But I've looked at the fall in a lot of different ways. Certainly, I think fall for us is a chance to make sure that we're getting back into the swing of baseball, is getting back into the routine. I think getting into our reps. I think for us, ingraining and starting that culture that we already talked about, as far as how we want to do stuff, what we want to do, our tempo of how we want to work. And I really like to use the fall to start to build a little bit of that database with each kid. We like to do individuals. I think gives me some time to break it down one-on-one and really slow it down, but be able to give them an opportunity to ask questions, to know what we're doing, specifically with a new coach coming in. I think that is a big part of it here in the fall. But being able to build that catalog of, looking at each swing, being able to break down some video. Certainly we don't have, 4 hours to do that here at MIT. You are very crammed into what we have, which I think actually is a blessing too. You got to be organized as a coach. You got to be ready to rock and roll and know what each person's doing at each time. So we try to do those, and then, we'll play, one game on the weekend. I like to inter squad. I think it gives me a chance to slow it down. I know playing I'm a big believer on use the fall to teach, and a big, hey, here's what this situation, here's what we're going to do with runners on first and second. And, do we remember that all the time going into the spring? No, but you have a background in it. It always helps. So that would be kind of our goal, is to get to know each other, start developing that work ethic that we've always had here at MIT, since Coach B's been here, and then just get ourselves organized, ready to go, and then embrace the weight room. And I really think the weight room, in my opinion, is the biggest part of the fall. Should be, go get in the weight room, get stronger, get faster. We have a lot of multi-sport athletes, that have done a lot of different things that may not have been fully into the weight room. And, now it's a chance to go do that, and I think those are all aspects that come into play here at MIT.
Sounds like fun to me, man. Maybe I can jump on campus and get a couple reps in. Coach Morris, I want to say this. I think far too often we adults, a lot of baseball guys, that don't take the time to slow down and smell the roses and like really understand where you're at. So let's through the lens of your kiddos. You got 3 kiddos. You said you got 2 boys. I think I saw a Twitter post yesterday. Maybe it was.
Oh yeah, Father's Day. Father's Day was about 600 ground balls and 500 BP pitches later. We're ready to rock and roll for a little afternoon barbecue. But when they wake up and roll over and say, "Dad, let's go play baseball," are you going to say no to that? No,
man.
Way.
Oh, that's the fact. Okay, so I want to know if you what your perspective on in where you're at in your life right now, if you got these young kiddos, like do your kids realize, whoa, my dad is a college baseball coach at MIT? Like, what do you think they see?
I think they just think I have a really cool job, to be honest. I don't know
Yeah.
if I don't know if it's really hit them here. Certainly they've had a great experience, here at Husson. Basically, I mean, Benny's been here. Max was 1, almost 2 when we moved
Wow.
here. So that's kind of all they've known, and we've had such a tremendous group here. To be honest, with a lot of just unbelievable people. Certainly some great athletes that have won a lot of baseball games, but just some great people. So I mean that piece of it is there. But we took the boys into the city a little bit. Was that last week? And kind of walked around the field a little bit, and I don't think it's quite hit them yet. Where Dad will be coaching, and that will be in a new spot here. But they definitely love the fact that, or they think it's funny. They're like, "Well, Dad, you coach baseball." I was like, "Yeah, but that's what I do now." So, and it's exciting for them to see that, and we have such great kids. Just speaking to them over the past couple of weeks, hearing about all the amazing stuff they're doing this summer is we're just excited to get them there and have them get ingrained, like I said, with our group. And I think I've told every kid, I go, you're going to have 2 shadows, so you better get ready to rock and roll here. So they'll be watching every move that you make. And certainly my oldest now is, got enough knowledge about baseball. He's like, well, Dad, you really sent him from third, huh? I'm like, yeah, I did. So starting to question Dad a little bit, which is fun for me, but just fully excited about it, and really just can't wait, to get them ingrained into MIT baseball. And the MIT community as a whole is just so special, from the athletic department all the way down. There's just so many great people there. We're really blessed to be there.
That's so cool. I truly just think that is one of the most amazing pieces of just sports in general, is watching the young ones start to kind of pick it up and have their own identity within the sport. And I can just imagine your son saying that to you. Talking with Coach Chris Morris, MIT, formerly of Husson. Man, you had a heck of a stretch. I'm curious, man, because Husson's in Bangor. Did I say that right? Bangor,
Yep,
Maine.
there you go.
Maine. I haven't
Right.
talked to a lot of people in Maine, but boy, that's a place I want to be at some point in my life. Boy, you spent 5 years there and you won 5 conference championships, consecutive conference championships.
Yep.
I'm just thinking to myself, okay, so I got to ask the questions. I'm like, dang, that's my alma mater. This is home. I win nonstop.
Yep.
That had to be a really tough decision. So talk me through kind of just professionally, because there's a lot of people out here that are probably in a similar scenario. Where should I pull the trigger? Should I do it? Should I not? What went into the decision making in leaving the alma mater and heading to MIT?
Yeah, it's something when I was a younger coach, this was when I was actually a football and baseball, and I think I did I did everything at Husson, actually, right when I got out of school. I had a great talk with a bunch of different coaches about just kind of what's this mean? Where do you go, right? As a younger coach, it's always kind of next job. Where can I get that? And that's the nature of it in a weird way. And I got great advice. It was don't chase the job, chase people. Go work for great people. Wow. And I've been really blessed to do that throughout my career. And I look back at it, and I was just really grateful I did that. Especially in my time here at MIT, I volunteered. I coached summer ball and did some stuff in recruiting and that side of things there. But just knew, being able to be around Coach B and Coach Carroll and Nick Gallagher was just a really important of my growth as a coach. I definitely don't do what I've done here at Husson over the last 5 years if I don't take that leap and say, you know what, I want to go coach there. Because I learned a lot of really valuable stuff about how to organize myself. I had to be a great communicator at MIT. I had to do a lot of different things that made me a better coach at the time. So I think that was a really big part of it. And I think that also grew me into the decision. It was a hard decision for me and my family. This has been home. We've taken Husson to new heights for sure, in a lot of different ways. But I just felt like it was the right time for me and my family, and it was the right situation. I wasn't just going to leave for another situation just to move on. It had to be the right spot. And I felt like MIT provides us with everything that, I think we can to succeed at a really, really high level. And it was just an unbelievable opportunity at an unbelievable school. And it was just, that's really what it kind of came down to for us. It really wasn't anything that happened here at Husson or anything like that. It ended up being MIT. And, we were just really, really excited about the opportunity to be the head coach at a school like this.
Heck yeah, man. Well, it's easy for me to see from the outside, but I'm an objective. I think I'm objective because you're like, well, yeah, but man, I appreciate that. I appreciate you sharing that because I can't imagine. I imagine it would be quite a few long conversations with the family, this, that. But I think you probably made the right one. I want to go into baseball forward and kind of our mission. Baseball forward's mission is elevating the next generation, and I think it's so important that that we do as much as we can to lift up the game, lift up the people in the game, and I feel like you're a great guy for that. So I'm curious. Let's talk advice for players, and when I say elevating the next generation, speaking specifically to players. What advice do you have for players, high school, youth, college guys? What advice do you have for players as it really relates to elevating the next generation?
Yeah, I think it's something that I've shared actually recently. Just, I think a couple people have reached out about, local kids about college baseball, and I think just baseball in general. And the one thing that I've always just gone back to with a lot of kids is don't forget, you play because you love to play, right? Yeah. I think it's a big factor for me is, I look, like yesterday, I said I threw, ground balls, all they wanted to do was slide at the very end, and how, they wanted to get dirty and slide into second base. And it, as simple as that is, you forget, that's why baseball was fun, right? You're like, I'm going to go slide and I'm going to dive and I'm going to do those things. And as we get older, I think we start to lose a little bit of that passion and that love for just having fun playing the game and being around good teammates. And I spoke with somebody else about, I got to do this to do this. And it's like, well, when you're only focused on that, you forget about all those other things and the love of the game that's going to take you to the next level.
Sure.
It puts added pressure onto you in my mind of, if I don't hit a double here, this coach in the stands isn't going to recruit me. I trace it back to, our a captain here who's, a 3-time all-region. He's all-time RBI, home run. Jackson Curtis, who was a senior for me this year. The first 3 times I think I saw him, I think he punched out 3 times, and it was, but he played a pretty good first base, was a good athlete, went and saw him play basketball and was just one of the more competitive kids I've seen, and I just loved his leadership skills. Wow. All those things came into play. So you just never know what a coach is going to see in you and never know what they're looking for, that day. I think skills always jump out to themselves in that way, but play because you love to play baseball and let that shine. When you let that shine and that competitiveness and that drive to go win, I think and that can be shared in every light from, a local ball, Legion, travel, showcase, whatever it might be. When you're out there just playing because you love to play and you have that energy and that passion, you see it on the field as a coach. You can hear it, kids talking and having fun in that world. But I think that would be a big message for me to that next generation of, just keep playing because we love baseball. It's such a great game, such an awesome game. We love it and hate it all in the same 10 minutes. But play because you love the game of baseball, and let everything else come into play.
Wow, that is beautiful. I love it, man. Okay, I want to get specific here. So, for anybody that's listening to the podcast, that's like, man, MIT. I want to play at MIT. What advice do you have for the recruits that listen to this that say, I would love to get Coach Morris's attention and I would love the opportunity to be recruited at MIT? What's the advice for those guys?
I mean, firstly, your academic piece is probably going to be the number one thing for us. You've got to be fit for us academically, and that's going to be maximizing your course loads in high school, getting prepped, and that's going to be early. Yeah, I think that's a lot of stuff for us right now is you start to see it, freshman, sophomore year, you have to be on top of it. And I think having a good, meetings with your guidance counselors and admissions and whatever else is going on there, but maximize your course load. and get your tests ready to roll. I think a lot of kids that get a little bit unorganized as the spring season and junior years unfold as far as the recruiting world, but making sure that you're organized from your SATs and your ACTs and taking those two. And then don't be afraid to reach out. I think, but within that, I think from an email standpoint, letting us know where you're going to be at. You'd be surprised how many emails we get, and it's, we really like this kid, but make sure you include all your information, your transcript, your test scores, your summer schedule, an update on your spring schedule, depending upon when you're sending it. But those are all great things. I mean, we're everywhere. We will be everywhere. With a brand like this. So you never know when we're going to cross paths with you. And then don't be afraid to come to a prospect camp. I think that's getting on a campus and being able to work with the coaches gives you great insight into the school, great insight into the coaching staffs. And that would be a big topic too for a lot of recruits. If you're really interested in a school, go there, go to a camp. It's, you never know what you're going to learn, good, bad, ugly.
Sure.
But I think that gives you a great chance to evaluate and make what, could be the best decision for you moving forward in your life.
It never made sense to me or makes sense to me when I hear parents or kids saying, "Oh, I got a camp invite." I'm like, well, if they are not going to naturally see you in the summer in your playing schedule, how the heck are you supposed to get recruited by them if they never see you? You got to show up on campus, right? How valuable are those prospect camps for you guys?
Very valuable. It's for us. You're right beside them now, right? You get to work with them.
Yep.
I think that's another part of it, right? I mean, you got your individual instruction and you get to work with them one-on-one and get to hear their voice and see how they coach. Does that coaching style fit you as a player? Does it not fit you as a player? School, we're right in Boston, right in Cambridge, does that fit you? Does that atmosphere fit you? I think that's one thing I wish more kids would do too earlier is just, start doing research, start looking at different areas. What do you like? What don't you like? Don't wait, till it's too late to start to make a decision on those things. You can start to get an idea of where you'd like to go to school. Here at Husson, do you want to be home? Do you want to go away? There's a lot of, different factors there. But that's really something that we feel like those prospect camps provide you a lot of information, on the school and gets you right in front of the coaches. If you really love that school and you really love the idea of playing there, you're right in front of them. You're guaranteed to be right in front of them. It's their camp on their campus.
Yeah.
You're guaranteed to be there. So I think that's a really valuable tool.
Just a no-brainer to me, those prospect camps. And I just have this flash of, I can't imagine being at like a local watering hole and having an MIT versus Harvard, like who's smarter? I can't, the minds walking around in that city are just crazy. A couple more questions for you here. Coach Morris, MIT, a couple more questions. Okay. You're a parent. You're a coach. Boy, I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to let you have the floor and I'm going to say this.
Yeah.
Your advice to parents out there, parents of ball players out there. What's your advice to parents of ball players out there in general?
I think, I guess, I mean, you could vary it by age, I guess, for a lot of different things. If you're, from a high school, perspective, embrace them. It's a crazy time frame right now. I think for a lot of high school students, they're being pulled in 1,000 different directions now. I feel like with a lot of kids, it's really daunting. You talk to a lot of kids and it's like, they're doing this, then they got this, then they got this, and then they have this. And you're like, from a recruiting, you're like, wow, you're busy, man. Like we'll talk next week. I'll shoot you a text. I think that's just be there for them, love them. That's, simple for me. I think that's embrace their passion. One thing that we talk about with a lot of our guys is we want passion in a lot of different areas. It's okay to be passionate about baseball. It's okay to be passionate about, soccer, football, hockey. It's okay to be passionate about your degree path. You want to, we spoke with a young man last night about, AI and, it's, he's super excited about the direction it's going in his internship. Cool. You're like, oh, wow. Like, yeah. And he just was so passionate about it. It fired me up, to be honest.
Wow.
I think having that passion and embrace all of those passions, because it's okay. I think it's a great thing in life to have passion for a lot of different things. You don't have to be that. Like we say, hey, you can be passionate for, school for those 6 or 7 hours, but we want you to be passionate about getting better for baseball for these hour and 45 minutes. give me that passion, that love, that drive for an hour and 45 minutes, and I'll get you out of here. So I think that's important. And I think younger, it seems like, we're kind of getting them. My son plays everything. I think it's great for them to, we actually started wrestling this winter, which was an event, fun to watch, which was great though. Like they started to gain some stuff from both, but don't let them just harp in on one thing. I think trust yourself, know what your kid's going to do, and embrace it. And I think all those things come into play. It doesn't matter your age, group, talent, skill, all of those things. You never know what can happen. And one of the best players that I played with growing up, didn't even play baseball, until he was in middle school.
Really?
It's funny how it's and he's a really good player for us, here at Husson too. And it's just, you never know when they're going to jump into it and what they're going to do. Kids are crazier in their own ways, right?
Yeah, man. And just embrace, like you said, because you know what? I feel like that you saying passion in multiple areas, that gives the kids the freedom to make the decisions on what they want to do. And like, I guess I've never really heard it that way, but hey, if I want to be the next, Jerry Garcia, Grateful Dead, or and I want to be a good baseball player at the same time, hey, give them the freedom to just go out and figure out what they enjoy doing. If they have passion, they're probably staying out of trouble. Is that fair to say?
I 100% agree with that. Yeah, I just, I do. I just, like my son right now, I mean, he loves every sport. It doesn't matter. It's pretty much whatever ball's in his hand, it's like, I'm obsessed with this, and it's, I think it's okay. And I think that was something that I learned along the way a little bit, just, talking to recruits and, seeing when kids got here and, as you develop it, you start to see that, that's exciting for them to be passionate about a lot of things, because when they're passionate about something, it gives them energy, it gives them confidence, and it's, I think it's good. Then you can foster that into different directions and, let them just love whatever they're in love with at that time, and have some fun with it and embrace that and, guide them and be there. And, it all works out, in my opinion. It really does. It all kind of shuffles itself out in the process of things and, gets them to where they want to be.
Coach Chris Morse, MIT. What position did you play in football?
I was a DB, defensive back.
I was gonna. So, let's just call this what it is. You ran really well.
I was okay. I was more of a cover guy on the back end of things there a little bit, but yeah.
Okay. All right. I want to know this too. The real hard hitting questions. What kind of music do you listen to?
Geez. I mean, to be honest, we have our Husson pregame mix, which is pretty much what my go-to has been for the past little bit as far as plugging that into. But country, probably, if I had to pick something and let it go, it was, that's a little more friendly with the boys in the car.
Yep.
So that'd probably be my go-to right now if I was, firing up something right on the radio right now.
Do you ever listen to like any of your players because I'm sure they have their own walkout music. Do you ever listen to that stuff and you're just like, oh, geez, what is that?
Well, it's usually the new stuff that comes out. I'm like, the ones that have like the beats, I'm like, oh, I like the beat. And then it's like, where are we going with this? What do we got going on here? And then it's Coach, you wouldn't, our guys knew me well enough now. They're like, this isn't for you. And I was like, okay, sounds good. And then they know they'll send it to me. But yeah, it's certainly a mix of both sides.
I want to ask you one more question. Surprisingly, I'll get a lot of coaches, younger coaches that'll reach out and just have conversations with them. And I want to do my best to speak with them and to speak, let you give the advice. So here's my question for you. A lot of young coaches out there don't really know which way to go. They don't know what direction they should take their career in. So what advice do you have for the coaches coming up in the game of baseball?
Yeah, I think embrace where you're at, I think is the number one. I think for me, I see a lot of, younger coaches. And again, I think I said it earlier here in the podcast, it was, they're, whether it's chasing the next job or looking for the next one, which is a part of it, from a younger coach, you're always wanting to improve your profession, right. And get to the next spot, which is a part of that. But value people along the way, value who you're coaching with. You want to be a great coach, surround yourself with great coaches. Wow. And you want to, and I do, I think that's a really big part of it, is, you got to coach more too. I look back at, my career here a little bit as a super young coach. I think I did middle school basketball, might have been one of my biggest learning jumps.
Wow.
Right. And I was that was might have been that first year out. It was a B team, I think. And then I obviously coached football. I coached high school football and coached college football. But as a coach, you got to be able to coach. Right. And I think that's a lost art sometimes. So you got to be able to, use your voice, find ways to communicate with kids, so don't be afraid to coach multiple things, especially you're trying to find, some revenue and find some money and be able to do it as a younger coach. There's one spot to be able to do it in, but go coach, do those things and value people, because the relationships are going to be what carry you in this profession. There's going to be good times, bad times. There's never going to be good money, but making sure that you value those relationships, because there's just so many great people, specifically in the game of baseball, but coaching in general. There's so many great people throughout it, that value all those types of things, and it'll carry you a long way.
Wow, that is so valuable. Chris Morris, man, what a positive, upbeat conversation. I'm like, man, you look like you could go play still. You look like you're.
I do have the baby. That's where I can't wear a jersey in the dugout still, because I get the why are you out here? I'm like, well, I'm coming to question the call. That's why I'm out here. But
hey, I would, if I was you, I'd maybe try to squeeze in that bat or two.
Yeah.
At least in the fall. All right, take us out. Give us a few final words on the Baseball Forward podcast. Coach Chris Morris at MIT. Give us a few final words, and then I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on. I think this is really awesome what you're doing. I think with social media now, I think it's helping grow the game in a lot of ways. It really is. I mean, you just see it. And, I know for me, it's, I get into this and, I've had some decently long trips, from Bangor, Maine, recruiting and whatnot. And we'll have some more coming this way. But, podcasts like this, they're always great to throw on. You never know what you're going to learn too.
That's right.
You listen to somebody else speak, and if you do this the right way for long enough, you listen to a lot of different coaches. There's been some guys who are just unbelievably successful in this, and you pick a couple things from them. And I think coaching is a lot of ways taking ideas and making it your own, and a way to adapt it to your style or your program or your team, whoever, your kids. I've listened to a couple of youth podcasts, like, well, how do I coach that? But being able to do those things are really excited, and I just really appreciate what you're doing for the game. This is really, really cool, and certainly blessed to be a part of it. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, hey, you're an ally. You're a friend of the podcast of Baseball Forward. We thank you very much, Chris Morris, new head baseball coach at MIT, episode 60. We'll see you next time.